Almost all of the attacking series that we've seen so far in this video involve the idea that we were the ones initiating the attack. We actively sought out half guard and we went in to establish good attacking positions from half guard. That's not always going to be the case. Remember, guys, that as we saw earlier in the video, half guard is both the path to heaven and to hell. For an opponent who knows what they're doing and gets good chest-to-chest contact, pins our shoulders with that far side underhook, it's a very, very strong passing position for them. If we can get our own underhook up into a tight waist and get onto our side, then it's a very good position for the bottom player. So half guard has tremendous potential for both top or bottom position, top or bottom player, depending upon who controls the far shoulder and the far hip. In situations where the opponent controls the outside shoulder and the outside hip, then you must come back to the elbow escape as the fundamental series that you must employ. Now, when I say elbow escape, there are two particular kinds of elbow escape, two variations, which are particularly pertinent to the half guard situation. These are the half elbow escape and the double elbow escape. We're going to be looking at both. First, let's just quickly refresh our memory and understand just what an elbow escape is. It's probably a move that you learned on your first day in jiu-jitsu when someone was in the mounted position on top of you. So we'll start with the training partner mounted on us. And you guys will remember that you were taught something like this. A frame was put across in front of your training partner. You turned onto your side with a small bump, which got your knee just inside their ankle, like so. Some of you were probably taught to go across and capture your training partner's ankle, like so. Then you made a shift of your hips, which pointed your knees at the floor and lifted your training partner's knee, so that you go around and capture the whole leg. As you captured one of your training partner's legs, you were then instructed to bring your elbow inside on the other side, like so, form an effective frame, shrimp your body out, and from this position, bring your knee in front. Some of you were taught to go into a butterfly guard. Some of you were taught to go all the way around and lock up a closed guard. Okay, so that was the basic elbow escape, at least something close to that, which you were taught on your first day in jiu-jitsu. Now, how does that pertain to the half guard situation? Well, obviously, half guard, you don't start in the bottom of the mount, so you don't perform the full elbow escape. Rather, you perform the second half of it. So this is a half elbow escape. So let's have a look at it from the point of view of someone employing it from half guard. My opponent has gotten into half guard. They are chest to chest, and they have secured an underhook on the far side. The first problem you're going to face here is your opponent's crossface is designed to make it very hard to turn in and get to an elbow escape. So that's your first problem. How do we get around this problem? By holding all the way inside our training partner's shoulder as he goes to crossface. Presumably his knee will be up and he'll be driving into me. We want to be able to move inside our training partner's crossface. So I get a good handful of shoulder here. I make sure that I'm disciplined with my lower legs. If I'm too loose, you can just step out at any given time and pass. It would have been more intelligent, like so. So it's important from here that we're always doing a good job of controlling our training partner's leg, keeping our legs disciplined around his. Now from here, he goes to crossface. We want to be able to slip our shoulder inside. Okay, so we turn down on our training partner's crossface. We start shrimping our body out like so. I'm going to put my elbow inside my training partner's knee. I'm going to invert my right knee. You know it's inverted because my toes are pointing down towards the floor. If my toes are pointing up to the ceiling, you will notice that my knee always runs into his hip, and I'll never successfully bring my knee inside his legs. Okay, so it's very important once I get that elbow inside that I turn my toes down. As a result, my knee and elbow come easily together. Then I place my knee, I bring my knee right here to my training partner's hip, like so. That knee on his hip is your visual and tactile cue that you are about to succeed. Because the minute my knee goes in front of his hip, for the first time, I can push on my opponent. So as he tries to hold on to me, now I have a capacity to push on my opponent, which I lacked previously. As long as his leg is in front of my knee, I have no ability to push on his body. I can only pull with my legs, and that's not going to help because it's pulling him into me. I need to be able to push and create space. So as he gets a strong body cross face, you need tight like so. We're always looking to get inside that shoulder. We're always looking to keep disciplined with our legs, good connection here. Can't be floppy with the legs and he just steps out. So we're locked in tight. Now we start shrimping our body out and inverting our toes down towards the floor. Because my toes are inverted, it's very easy to get inside the knee. Bring your knee in tight. It's very easy to get inside the knee with our elbow, and then bring knee and elbow together right there to the hip. No matter how tightly he holds on up in the upper body, now you can just push and create space. And as a result, you've hit that half elbow escape. Your whole target is to bring your knee from behind his hamstring to in front of the hip. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, does it? To move from behind the hamstring to in front of the hip. But at World Championship level, that small movement, it's not an easy thing to do, because he'll be doing everything he can to prevent that transition from behind to in front. And your best bet to make that transition, it's not a big distance, but you've got a lot of resistance to go through. Your best transition involves inverting your knee. The more my knee points upwards, the more it catches behind his hamstring. You'll never get through. You'll push and push and you'll never get your knee through. Your whole thing from here is to start that action of inverting your knee. It's that simple inversion which gets us through and in front of the hip like so. Now as he goes to hold us off, we just push, because the first time now you can push on your opponent is you have a knee, okay? Push, 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 and now you're in business, okay? You'll often hear me as a coach screaming at my students when they get on top of their butterfly garter. You'll hear me say, go over the knee, over the knee. Now, what does that mean? Why is it so important to go over someone's knee? Because the knee represents the last pushing surface on the leg. I can push with my feet, I can push with my shins, and I can push with my knee. But with my hamstrings and upper legs, I can only pull. Okay, so when I'm behind, my opponent has stepped over my knee, the only thing I can do now is pull with my legs. And that's not going to do me much good. Okay, only my feet, shins, and knees can push. If I need to push this guy back, it means I've got to get my feet, shins, or knees in front. It's impossible to get my feet in front. There's not enough space. Difficult to get the shins, but the knees are possible. Okay, so from here we're always looking to invert, and from this position get that knee in front. And now as he tries to push forward, he runs into that barrier from where I can push. And from here, it's an easy thing to go in and hold him off. Okay, now that's Jiu-Jitsu 101. Let's start to get more sophisticated, because you guys aren't going to be fighting Jiu-Jitsu 101 style for very long. Pretty soon you've got to fight at championship level, and then you've got to get more sophisticated. Okay, we're in here, half guard bottom. A lot of times, I'm going to show you the other side soon, so don't worry about what I'm going to show you with the right hand. I'll come back to that very shortly. A lot of times I don't really elbow escape. A lot of times I use a frame of the heel of the hand inside the hip and my second hand here. I'm not a particularly tall person, so I usually can't get the second hand to the hip. I normally just put my hands on the lat muscle, like so. But it's just a pushing frame like this. Now, when I go to shift out, I often put this knee right there in the hip. Why? Because it's damn easy. As he drives forward into me, I've got to get his hips moving back a little, okay? So I start like shifting out, and I get my first knee in. So when he goes to drive forward, it's quite difficult. And that makes it a lot easier for me to invert my knee and get that knee in front. Okay, he goes to drive forward into me now, and it's pretty easy to complete that elbow escape. I'll show you that from the other angle. Okay, Jiu-Jitsu 101. You get your elbow inside the knee. But if he's smart and he turns the knee in, that's damn difficult to do. So what I typically do is I put the heel of the hand in the hip and the second hand here on his opposite lat muscle / hip, depending on how tall you are. Now, I hold with one leg here, so if he tries to step out, it's not so easy. If I just loosen my legs, he steps out easily. So there's some tension in my right leg. Now, when I go to shrimp out once, I bring my knee in, sit up. So my knee's right there in the pocket of the hip. Nothing crazy. I'm not trying to bring my knee all the way across. It's right there on the pocket of the hip. So when he goes to drive forward, it's quite difficult. That takes a little tension off bringing the knee in. That brings a little tension off, and as a result, I can get my elbow more easily. I can bring my elbow more easily inside the knee. And as a result, I can just invert and bring my knee right in front of his hip. He tries to drive forward. I pinch my two knees together. It's a pinch. I'm not spread out like this. Pinching together. Strong. Come in. Now, I just push and extend my body. And as a result, we've got that elbow escape. So one more time. Half guard bottom. Right now, he's in the driver's seat. He's winning at this point. From here, put the heel of the hand in. Second hand goes in place. Foot comes up to the knee. I shrimp out just enough to bring that knee inwards. He tries to drive in. It's difficult. Now from here, we invert that knee and get in front of his hip. I push, and the elbow escape is completed. He no longer controls my head. Okay? Always bear in mind, guys, the thing I'm most concerned about in half guard top is my opponent controlling my head and shoulders. If he controls the head and shoulders, it's a serious problem. He's doing it through the underhook and the crossface. So that's always my intention. I want to break the underhook, I want to break the crossface. Okay? We saw earlier, when someone hits a strong upper body position, one of the best things we can do is make them base out with their underhook. And as a result, we steal the underhook from them. Okay? Now we're looking at a situation where I want to attack his crossface. So we lock in, lock, shift, knee goes in, hold tight, and then we just push until the crossface is broken. Okay? So we're always looking to deny head control to an opponent. That's the half elbow escape. The half elbow escape is an excellent defensive mechanism that denies head control to your opponent. But better yet is the double elbow escape, where we perform two elbow escapes on one side of an opponent's body that transitions us from a defensive move into an offensive move. So, same situation, opponent controls my head. That's never a good thing. So we control the hip on both sides. We shrimp out far enough that I can invert my toes down to the floor. Because my toes and knee are inverted, it comes through so much more easily than if my toes are facing up to the ceiling. I pinch my two knees together around his hip, I push off, and I break my training partner's crossface. I get inside control, so if he goes back to my head, it's difficult. Now from here, I bring a second elbow escape, where I go from the hip to the shoulder. Now when he goes to relock, there's a barrier in the way. Now his head and one arm are controlled between my legs in a position called the clamp. Okay? When he goes to yank his arm free, it's notoriously difficult. If he comes to drive towards me, this knee makes it difficult. If he goes to pull away from me, this knee makes it difficult. So now you're in control of distance. The biggest fear that I have in half guard bottom is that he gets to my head and I no longer control distance. I always want, in half guard, the ability to manage distance behind knee shields, like so. Distance management is key. When he gets chest to chest, he's killed my ability to control distance. Now I'm reacting to what he's doing. The best way for us to get back to distance control is some kind of elbow escape. First, half elbow escape. And then ultimately, double elbow escape, where I go with my knee from the hip to the shoulder, into the clamp. And when I have the clamp, he tries to pull away, top knee won't let it happen. Tries to push in, bottom knee makes it difficult. And as a result, you've got excellent control, which will translate into various submissions that we'll be looking at shortly. But your best friend, whenever you've lost control of your opponent in top half guard, and he's now controlling distance through chest-to-chest position and an underhook and a crossface, is the elbow escape. The two you must specialize in from half guard are the half elbow escape as a defensive measure that gets your knee on the hip and enables you to push back on an opponent. And the second is the double elbow escape, where you perform a second elbow escape motion that takes your knee from his hip to his shoulder into the clamp position. This gives you distance control in two directions, forwards and backwards, and enables you to turn what was once a very defensive, unpromising position into an extremely offensive, attacking position. Let's switch our attention from the defensive aspects of an elbow escape into counter offense. You will remember that when we looked at situations where our opponent was chest to chest and they had an underhook on the far side and a crossface on the near side, most people would describe this as a situation where the top player is controlling the events and has a dominant position. I believe overall they'd be right about that. But that can all be turned around by the simple act of an elbow escape. And we've seen from situations where we're able to shift out, invert our knee, and get our knee in front of our training partner's hip. The second your knee gets in front of their hip rather than behind their hamstring, you now have an ability to push. And as a result, you can turn this crossface and this underhook into a liability. As long as my knee is behind his hamstring, this crossface and this underhook are an asset for our opponent. An asset that can really make our life quite miserable here in the bottom position. But the second your knee goes from behind the hamstring to in front of the hip, so that now you can push on an opponent and control distance, now those assets become liabilities. And one of the best ways we can really turn them into a liability is through the use of udigatami. Okay, so when we push, separate our training partner's arms, you get an ability to go underneath that arm. And as a result, you can go udigatami on either one of your opponent's arms. Okay, now a natural question for you to be asking is, what the hell is udigatami? Well, this is often referred to as a reverse armbar. It's where the arm is already extended and pressure is applied directly on the elbow joint and creating very strong braking mechanics. Now, udigatami is not a move which figures heavily in the successful submissions in jiu-jitsu. I know I always talk about the idea of high percentage submissions. And you might be curious as to why am I making a special study of udigatami. If you look at the world championships over the previous couple of decades, you don't see many udigatami submissions. You see them occasionally, but it's relatively rare. The real value of udigatami is not as a submission in itself, but rather as its ability to create quick, sharp attacks on an opponent that elicits strong defensive reactions. And off those defensive reactions, you go into other moves which really are effective. Now, udigatami, as I said, hasn't been a particularly high percentage submission over the years. Some of the reason for that is because it's typically taught rather poorly, and many people apply it in ways which are not optimal. So once our mechanics improve, you can expect an increase in the submission success rate. Nonetheless, we have to keep our eyes open to the fact that it is one of the more difficult moves to apply in world championship competition, and therefore we should be able to feed off the defensive reactions of an opponent and go into combination attacks that will actually succeed and get the breakthrough that you seek. So let's start looking at the mechanical features of a good udigatami, and let's understand that the low percentage success that it's had in competition over the previous generations. Part of it is because of the very nature of the move itself. It's less controlling than other forms of arm lock attack like udigatami or kimura. But part of it is also because the mechanics aren't particularly well understood and sometimes there's this faulty application. So you want to understand that if a move's going to fail, it should be because the other guy is really good and knows how to defend it, rather than because you screwed up the application. So let's have a look at just straight up mechanics of an ujigatami. So you've got an opponent here on two knees. What we're looking for is to control an opponent between our knees, okay? The pinch of my knees should control either the head or the shoulder. My personal preference is to pinch my two knees around one shoulder, but it's not wrong to also have a knee on either shoulder and include the head as well. This too is an effective method. But my own personal preference is to focus on two knees around one shoulder. Now the purpose of these knees is to immobilize the shoulder joint. The wrist is immobilized by the pinch of my shoulder and neck together. Okay, our intention is to rotate our training partner's elbow forward. The more the elbow rotates backwards, the more his head can rise and the arm can be bent and pulled back. Okay, and that's going to defeat the move. So what we need is an extended arm and the head controlled down towards the floor. So I want to focus on my knees pointing downwards, regardless of how I have my knees. Whether I have his head between the knees or my knees around his shoulder. Okay, in both cases I want my knees pointing forwards. The more my knees point upwards, the easier it is for him to rotate his elbow and begin to pull away. So we always want his elbow rotated well forward. Let's look at what happens if he rotates the elbow backwards. The head rises. But if I rotate the elbow forwards, the head always goes down. So we always want his elbow rotated forwards like so, as much as possible. And at the same time, the head will follow in a downwards trajectory. The closer his head is to the mat, the easier it is to break our opponent's arm. The more the head rises towards the ceiling, the more the elbow can rotate so that the pit of the elbow faces upwards, and now it's almost impossible to break. Okay? So when we start off in here, regardless of whether we have the head inside our knees or just the shoulder inside of our knees, what we're looking to do is to turn that elbow forwards and down. If my opponent goes to push towards me, my knees make it quite difficult. If he goes to pull away, the knees also make it quite difficult. Okay? Here's a word to the wise. The primary control comes from your two knees, but it's a good thing if you can add your feet into the equation as well. A big problem is your opponent's other arm. If he makes it strong, it's very hard for me to bring his head downwards. So what I often do is I get control of my training partner's elbow and I use my shoelaces to move his arm away and take away his base of support. Okay? So again, this arm can often be a problem. The more strong and stiff it is, the harder it is for me to bring his head down. And the head must come down for a successful application. First method of bringing the head down is elbow rotation, where I take a false grip. It's a wrist bent 90 degrees, and I go wrist deep around his elbow, strong. And from here, I look to rotate the elbow forward. But that won't completely solve the problem. So I bring my foot here, and I just push his base of support out, and now you get that superior pinch around like so. It's very, very hard for him now to re-establish the height of his head. Okay? And as a result, we're able to go through into a strong breaking position. Now, how we go to break, I like to take my elbow and put it right here on top of his elbow. I'm not a big fan of pushing with the hands. Okay, you can get it to work. It is possible if you're a big, strong fellow, but it's not optimal. Much better is to put your elbow directly on top of his elbow and reinforce it with your own hand. Okay, now guys, you must be precise here. There is a world of difference between putting your forearm on his forearm or on his tricep. You should not be able to see your opponent's elbow, and it should be covered precisely by your elbow. This is truly one of those areas where inches count. Okay, just a small misalignment away can have a significant reduction in breaking power, whether it be towards me or away from me. You want to be precise and find the elbow joint. Make sure if you're going after your opponent's right arm, it's your left elbow on his elbow joint. Don't get them mixed up. This will not create any pressure. It will make it very easy for him to rotate his elbow and escape. Okay? So starting again from a situation where we get our knees around our training partner. We're looking always to get our head in towards him and his head down towards the mat. This is going to create the optimal situation to come down and get into our breaks. I want to make sure I'm on my side. The more I'm on my back, the less effective I am and the easier it is for him to rotate, even if I have my knees around him. If I'm on my back, it's so easy for him to rotate through. I always want to create situations where I'm forward onto my side. I will often use my bottom foot in the mat to turn belly down on my opponent. And from here, we can get tremendous braking pressure. I'm always certain to get right onto my training partner's elbow joint. Okay, never just vaguely putting the arms anywhere, like this kind of business. Left versus right and vice versa. Now from here, we turn up and we're in perfect position to get strong braking pressure. Now, those are general points that you could learn from pretty much anyone. Let's look now at the precise points which really do make a difference. Okay, the great rule of Udigatami is this. When I go to control it and it's time to break, what I teach all of my students is I want my hips to move away and my head to move towards his head. The most common mistake I see is people try to break with stationary head and hips. So everything just degenerates into you pushing down on his elbow joint. It's just your arms versus his arms. Now, if you're big and strong, that can work because two of your arms theoretically should be stronger than one of his. But what really makes any breaking move work is the application of your hips. So what we do in this case is we lock everything up and watch how my knees pinch together and my hips move away from him and my head moves towards him. And it's that which makes the difference. Okay? I'm going to take some pressure off. I'm going to deliberately hold in the wrong place so that I don't hurt my training partner. And I'm going to show what this movement would look like. Okay, so you can see I'm not putting pressure on the elbow so I don't hurt my training partner. I'm putting it up here on the forearm. And even from here, when my head goes in towards him and my hips move away, you get tremendous braking pressure. Okay, so always we're up on our side and that's where we get our braking pressure. If you were over the elbow joint itself, then you would get a severe injury, okay? This is true regardless of whether we pinch just the shoulder or when we pinch the head and the shoulder, okay? As a general rule, this is my preference, so we can't turn towards us. But it's not wrong to go here too, okay? In either case, my right goes over after his left elbow. So it's always opposite sides. And we hold our own elbow to pinch everything in case. We try to avoid this kind of gripping, which can work, but is very, very loose and very easy to turn inside. So we're always looking to go through and get that grip, and then create that pressure of my hips moving away. Okay? Now, the most important thing is your knees, but it's not wrong to start incorporating your feet into the move as well. Okay, it can lock you in place and create a little bit of a lock which solidifies the position of your knees. It's not essential, but it can be a useful thing. Okay, so really it's the knee position that's the most important. But if you're worried about your knees moving and he's moving around, you feel like the knees are starting to loosen, it's not wrong to hook over the top and anchor yourself into position using your feet like so. You can also use feet on the floor to invert and from here create very strong braking pressure. Okay, so it's not wrong to incorporate the feet as well. Now, from a situation where we start off with our knees in close, we swim through, we're always underneath our training partner's arm, right goes against left, and there's that braking position that we seek. If he tries to base out with his other arm, you always take that away. And from here, we get very strong braking pressure. Okay? So this is the mechanics behind a good Udigatami. In summary, make sure you're elbow to elbow. Make sure it's your right versus his left or your left versus his right. This is key. A deviation of even a few inches of the point of your elbow away from his creates big reductions in breaking pressure. So be precise. Secondly, achieve a good pinching of the knee. You can pinch around one elbow, or you can pinch around the elbow, around one shoulder, or you can pinch around the shoulder and the head. They're both great. Make sure you obey the rule of the head and the hips. Your head moves towards his head and your hips move away. This is how you bring body weight into the Udigatami, and you take it away from being just your arms versus his arm. Okay? And that's how you break bigger, stronger people with this move. You can use your feet actively to kick away his base of support, and you can use your feet actively to hook into your opponent's body to solidify the position of your knees. If you use these broad principles, you can take Udigatami and maximize its effectiveness. Now we're looking at the idea of attacking with Udigatami out of an elbow escape from half guard. I've got good news for you. You can attack either arm. It's just a slight variation in how you enter. But anytime you come out of a nice elbow escape from half guard, both arms are available for a strong Udigatami attack. One of the great advantages of Udigatami, it's one of the fastest of all the arm locks. It's a very quick way to put pressure on an opponent and get strong defensive reactions, and from those you go into your actual finishes. But it's kind of used like a jab, where you use it as a setup to other blows. So we have an opponent who's on top of us in half guard, and we come out into an elbow escape. Off that elbow escape, we create an underhook here underneath our training partner's arm, and that gives us the ability to go into Udigatami. On the other side, I have an overhook. Now, the way we use this is we come up and we roll through and turn it into an underhook. There are Teigatami attacks from here. There are Judigatami attacks from here. But if we want Udigatami, we have to roll the arm forward and get underneath it and get that underhook in place so my left elbow is on his right elbow. Okay, so once again, coming out of half guard, we elbow escape, toes and knees pointing down to the floor so we can get in front of his hip, just like so. Now, as we push away at that elbow escape, I can go directly into his left-hand side and take my underhook. So that would be a very direct form of attack. Or I can bring my knees in front, roll, and find myself in Udigatami territory on the other side. Let's look at how they work. Let's look at attacking the cross-face hand first, and then we'll look at attacking the underhook arm second. So he's in tight. From here, we turn out, elbow escape. That cross-face, which was such an asset for him just a few seconds ago, becomes a liability the second my knee comes in front. So from here I control my training partner's arm, and now I start the action of turning across to the other side. This creates a situation where both of my knees are pinched around his head. Rotate around to the camera. Now, our first responsibility here is to prevent the head from rising. So our whole thing is to turn our body down towards the floor. You have the choice between capturing the head between your knees or just the shoulder. His whole thing is going to be to push off his right hand and try and bring the head back up. You see this? We're constantly trying to take away his base of support. We're constantly trying to keep that shoulder well pinned between our knees. And from here we go right versus left. We lock up, we're precise. We physically find his elbow joint with our elbow. And then from here we bring our head towards him and our hips away, and we get strong breaking pressure. If you feel the need to hook inside, that's fine. Okay, from here, same thing, breaking pressure away. If on the other hand, we elbow escape out, roll through, Udigatami on the other side. He bases out with his arm, we take it away. And from here, we're in perfect position to apply breaking pressure. Okay. Seen from another angle. Elbow escape. From here, pushing gives us elbow control. A movement out to the opposite side creates a very, very strong attacking position. Whereas my hips move away, we get a good breaking position. On the other hand, if I come out and perform a double elbow escape, we pinch around our training partner's head, we go through and get into a very strong breaking position. So you can see that Udigatami can be applied just as easily on both sides out of any elbow escape. Now, we're looking at the idea of Udigatami as one of the very best follow-up attacks to a successful elbow escape or half elbow escape out of half guard. We've looked at Udigatami, the mechanics, and we've seen that if our opponent's head rises, Udigatami becomes much less successful. A big part of what we're trying to do is to bring the head downwards. So if the head rises, what should we be looking to do? Well, you've got two great options. One is to switch off into triangle attacks, and the other is to switch off into shoulder crunch sumigeshi. Let's look at the shoulder crunch sumigeshi first. Okay. You've got an opponent in your half guard. You try to move out. You hit a nice elbow escape. When you go away from your opponent, you capture the arm successfully. You move through, but unfortunately, you feel your opponent's head starting to rise and coming towards you. As it comes towards you, you can rotate his elbow, pull free, and you've lost the move. Okay? So, whenever we feel the head rising, a good form of attack is to drop your foot from the hip to inside your opponent's legs, like so. And then from here, come through and lock. It's a pinch headlock. When he goes to pull away from us, it's a difficult thing. You had an underhook, he goes to rise up with his head, you capture the head and pull it in with a pinch headlock. He goes to pull out, difficult. Now from here, we lock and slip straight on through. So you have a good grip on your training partner's shoulder. Your whole key is to crunch his shoulder to your chest. So when he goes to rip his arm free, it's very, very difficult. Now from this position, we use our knees to bring him up into the air. With his body elevated up in the air, it's very simple for us now to use a combination of our elbows, turning him, and our feet, rotating him. And we end up in top position. So once again, we're here working from bottom half guard. We move out. We start that action of inverting our knee and toes so that we can elbow escape straight on through. I capture my training partner's arm. I try hard to rotate out in the opposite direction and attack with Udigatami, but unfortunately, I'm unable to control his head. It's one of the prime reasons why this move would fail. From here, I drop my feet inside my training partner's legs. I go around the head. As he goes to pull away, we sit up and lock the pinch headlock. From here, we slip the head on through. From this position, you have control of your opponent's head and shoulders. He goes to pull away. I focus on keeping the shoulder crunched to my chest. Now my knees come up to my chest and I bring him up off the floor. As a result, I can extend my right leg, lift my left, and turn him straight on over. So we end up with a nice attack. You can play this back and forth. So, as we hit the elbow escape, capture the arm. As I see him start to rise, and we capture our training partner right there. If I feel I make the transition across,
I get him up, but I cannot sweep him now. Perhaps he's basing out with his feet. And you feel like, man, it's tough. You can always go right back into the Udigatami and drive for the finish. So you can play these against each other. They work very, very well in unison.
Let's have a look at the application of the triangle as a follow-up to a failed Udigatami. I've tried to state that the single most common reason why Udigatami will fail is almost always your opponent's head position. You need their head lower than your head when you go to attack with Udigatami. Your opponents know that, and so one of the first things they're all going to try and do is to climb with the head. We've seen one way to deal with this is a shoulder crunch sumigation. Another excellent method is the triangle. Let's have a look at this. From a half guard situation, we go into a half elbow escape. We come through, capture our training partner's arm, and come out like so. If we see our opponent's head rising, you know what comes next. They turn the elbow, and it's all gone. Okay? So as soon as we see the head rise, a smart thing for us to do is to put our foot over our training partner's back and shift our hips out. As the head shifts out, we bring our leg over the top and swish the foot through. Now, you can forget about the Udigatami. Just go right back in and control your training partner's elbow and cast your legs over the top and just lock up a simple trap triangle. So when he goes to pull away from us, let your legs do the work. Just pinch your knees together around your training partner's head. Start bringing your foot across the back, turning through. You can grab the head if you wish. You can grab a hold of your own shin even better and pull the foot across their upper back and shoulders. As a result, it's very easy for us now to lock the figure of four and close everything up into a strong triangle. Off that triangle, you have the option of Udigatami. Interestingly, you can also turn this back into Udigatami on either side. Okay, so once again, we start off, elbow escape, shifting out, knee comes in front. We push away and capture our training partner's arm at the elbow. Now there's going to be a race between my desire to bring his head down for strong finishes and his desire to bring his head up. When we see that happening, we just turn around the corner and lock up that trap triangle. When he goes to yank his arm out, we want our hips high, presumably he'll be bending his arm. And then from this position, we go around the corner and lock up. He goes to pull away. It won't be easy. Even if he stands up now, just stay in place, lock the figure of four, and you're ready to finish. The same is true on the other side, only you'll be operating out of an overhook instead of an underhook. From a half guard, we go into a half elbow escape, and we turn it into a double elbow escape. When we feel the head rising, just place your foot over the top, foot goes in front, and we lock up our trap triangle. Initially, just the feet cross. He goes to yank away from us. It won't be easy. Even if he stands up, you'll be in a good position to rotate through, lock the figure of four, and strangle. With our backs to the camera, we go into a half elbow escape with my inverted knee. We switch to the double elbow escape. I see his head rising, foot goes over the top, leg goes through, and lock up the figure of four. As he goes to pull away, we're in a good position now to turn, lock up, and strangle for the finish. So when the head rises, the triangle is one of the very best follow-up options. Don't try to work Udigatami with an opponent whose head is rising. One of the great things about Udigatami is it's incredibly obvious when it will work and when it will fail. Understand always
that it's one of the fastest of all the arm locks, and indeed one of the fastest of all the submission holds. That's its primary virtue. But its primary vice is that the conditions to make it fail are relatively easy to attain. That's why it's one of the more low percentage moves. It's a great sharp attack, and if you get it in the first 2 seconds, awesome, the match is yours. But if your opponent rises, you've got to have good follow-ups. Think of Udigatami as a move where it'll either work in the first few seconds or it won't work at all. And it's up to you to have good follow-ups. The 2 best follow-ups are the shoulder crunch sumigashi and the triangle. There are others, we'll look at them soon. Now, Udigatami, as we said, is one of the fastest of all the submission holds, but also one of the least controlling. Because if your opponent's head starts going vertical or they start changing their body posture, the precise alignment required for a successful finish is lost, and that's why it's not one of the more commonly seen submissions in international competition. So it's up to us to be able to use it as a mechanism to either break them in the first few seconds or move them in predictable ways where you can follow up with a strong finish, a more high percentage finish, and get the submission you seek. One of these is Kimura. So, from a typical half guard situation, we're working from bottom. We go through into our half elbow escape, and from here we come through and we can either attack the far arm like so or the near arm off the overhook. Okay, I'll demonstrate it working like so. From here, as we come out into our attack, we've seen the most common form of defense is for the head to come up and the elbow to rotate so that the pit of the elbow faces the ceiling. A second form of defense is the opponent to bring the head even lower than I wanted it to go and rotate the elbow so far forward that I can't get breaking pressure. They bend their arm and you feel like I can't get the wrist where I need it up here on the shoulder. So they bend their arm and you can't get any break. And as a result, the move's just not there. Okay, I want an extended straight arm. He wants to bend the arm through, and as a result, I'm just not there with my finishing pressure. Whenever we see this, we're going to take our elbow, rotate through, rotate, keep going. Whenever we have the arm bent like so, we're going to take our elbow and go over the top. So I switch from my right, controlling his left, to my left over his left. Okay? So we were in here, working, he bent his arm. And as a result, I couldn't get the pressure I wanted. So I just go arm for arm. Now I go through and lock the figure of 4. Because his head is so low, he's very vulnerable to a follow-up Kimura. Now we just throw our leg over his back, and we find ourselves in a perfect position to get a good submission hold. So once again, we're here, we work our way into an elbow escape. Off that initial elbow escape, we slide out to the side, and we try hard for an initial Kimura, but he ducks down so low and rotates the arm, there's no breaking pressure. It's close, but no cigar. So I switch my arms, lock through and hold it. The danger now, he was pulled straight up and away. Okay, so don't stay here forever. Once you get that grip, push the wrist. Now when he goes to pull straight out, it's impossible. The straighter his arm, it's like holding onto spaghetti. So once we get this grip, once we've switched from right to left, I can hold with 2 arms. He goes to pull out. It's not easy. But the second I take this one away, he yanks, he's gone. So let's make a quick transition from here to the wrist and lock the figure of 4 and put a healthy bend in the arm. Now from here, I just kick over the top to control his forward roll, and we focus on taking his elbow to our armpit. And as a result, we get very strong breaks. Changing the angle. So here we are, elbow escaping. We move out, control his arm. Shift out the other side. We attempt Udigatami, and it fails. We go through and control. We don't stay in this position. We get a good healthy bend in the arm. Leg comes over the top. Rotate through. Now, what do I mean
when I say take his elbow to my armpit. Here, the arm has a lot of play in it. I want to take his elbow forward, up to his shoulder line. When it touches my armpit, even a tiny movement will break it. Out here, the further from the armpit, the more play there is in the arm. So our whole thing is to bring it forwards. And now even a tiny movement will break. So this is how we use Urigatami to set up Kimura. Now, we're trying to portray Urigatami as one of the fastest of all the submission holds in Jiu-Jitsu, but also one of the least controlling. That's why it doesn't figure heavily in the submission percentages in international competition. You see it occasionally, but it's not a regular performance. It's not like Kimura, heel hooking, rear naked strangle. These are in every competition you see examples. Urigatami comes along every so often. Now, part of the reason for that, as I said, is because the mechanics aren't well understood and it's not practiced very much by Jiu-Jitsu players. But the majority of the reason is because its very nature is less controlling. It's more of a speed move. So we can use it as an excellent method of intimidating an opponent into movement and then using that movement to set up the more high percentage sweeps and submissions that come off it. So that's how I want you to use Urigatami. I want you to be mechanically as sound as you can, but always understand that by its very nature, it's more likely you'll finish with the second move that comes after it than the Urigatami itself. Now, arguably the most high percentage finish that you can get out of an initial Urigatami attack is Jujigatami. I'm sure you can all guess the reason. Because Jujigatami does a much better mechanical job of controlling the position of your opponent's head. The whole key to Urigatami is pinning your opponent's head as close to the floor as possible. Jujigatami allows you to use your legs and your body weight through your legs to pin his head to the mat in a much more controlling way than just pinching your knees together. So let's have a look at how this works. Okay, the general story that we're trying to tell you here is that Urigatami is very easy to enter into, very fast to enter into, but not particularly controlling. Okay, so we use the virtue of Urigatami, that it's pretty easy to come in there and capture the arm. We use the virtue of Urigatami, that it's pretty easy to get our knees in place. But unfortunately, it's not a very controlling position because it's just a squeeze of our knees. And as a result, quite often from here, we'll lose the wrist. And you feel the wrist is lost. Just let it go. Let it go in front of you and start the action of inverting around your opponent's body. From here, we bring our knee in front of our man, and that pins his head to the floor. And we're in perfect position with the head pinned to go into our finishes. Okay? Sometimes they'll stay in a position prone with their belly down to the floor, and we'll just finish right here. Very often they'll try and relieve pressure by rolling through. And that's when we adjust our body position, cross-face our training partner's head. My personal preference is to go to a 3/4 Jujigatami with 2 legs, control our training partner's head, instead of the classic one controls the head, one controls the torso. I've always found head control is the more important of the two. When we control here, he can rotate out and escape quite easily. When we control the head with 2 legs, he goes to rotate out, significantly more difficult, and you have triangle options if it should fail. So, once again, we start off with an elbow escape. We push on our training partner's hip, and now that crossface becomes a liability. As we move out and away from our training partner, unfortunately, we're not able to fully control our training partner's wrist, and we lose the wrist. We shuck it on by. We invert over our training partner's mat and come down to a hip. We look at our opponent's body position. Because I have my foot over his head, I really do control his head in a much more decisive way in Jujigatami than I ever could with Urigatami. That's why Juji finishes a lot more people than Uri does. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Now, from here, we lock up and control that arm. I bring it to my armpit, just like so. And I go forward with my hips for the submission hold.
A lot of your opponents will try to capitulate to their back to relieve pressure and get into a better escaping position. Not a bad gambit on their part. If they don't do that, you can physically roll them through by pushing with the foot on the back of their head and pulling with the other leg and force them to roll. Now we rotate our hips, and from here I go over the top of the collarbone, reinforce with the second leg like so. So we have a 3/4 Jujigatami, as opposed to a conventional Jujigatami where I have a foot in the armpit and a foot over the neck. We've got 2 over the neck. When he goes to rotate out, it's a very difficult thing. If he goes to rotate in towards me, then he sacrifices himself to the triangle. Okay, so it's a fantastic finishing position. Now let's have a look at this from a different angle. From a situation where we start off with that elbow escape. We come through, capture our training partner's arm and lock up. As he goes to pull away, and make it as difficult as possible, coming up towards him. But no matter how difficult we make it, there's always that chance you'll lose the wrist, and it shucks on by. Now the danger is his head will rise, and if it rises, everything is lost. So it's important for us that we invert and we get our hips higher than his head. Then I bring my shin to the back of his head and I rotate through. If we just change our angle, other way, keep walking, no. Rotate through, no, other way. Okay. You will see that my shoelaces are on the back of his head. So this pins his forehead to the mat. He tries to bring the head up, it's going directly into my foot. Now from here, we have a tremendous ability to break. He tries to make his body resistant and hold the position, and he gets the break right here. He will often voluntarily roll to relieve pressure. If he chooses not to, you can make him roll by pushing the head inwards and pulling your top leg backwards, scissoring, to force him into the roll. We shift, foot goes over the top, second foot reinforces, he goes to rotate out, and it's a very strong breaking position. He goes to turn in and puts himself directly into a triangle hold. So Udigatami combines incredibly well with Jujigatami. Juji has the great advantage of superior head control. The great failing of Udigatami is weak head control. So this combination, as it were, works with the best of both worlds. The great advantage of Udigatami is speed of entry. Straight in. You get the underhook, rotate, and it's on. But its great failing is lack of head control. Jujigatami is relatively slow to enter with and rather predictable. But its great virtue is superior control of the head at the time you complete it. So it's a much more controlling lock. When you combine Udigatami and Jujigatami, you get the best of both worlds. You get the speed of entry with Udigatami, and you get the controlled finish of Juji. And if you combine these two together, you can create some magic down on the mat. Let's look at a mechanical detail which I often teach to my students. A strange thing about studying my students is you don't really see them applying Udigatami in competition as often as you would expect, given what I'm showing you here in this video. There's a practical reason for that. They're also damn good at shoulder crunch sumigaeshi, that when they get that position, they normally go right to shoulder crunch sumigaeshi. But people are often shocked when they come to grapple in the gym with the squad and realize that Udigatami is a big part of what we do. We tend to use it as a means of destabilizing an opponent, of a sharp, fast attack that intimidates an opponent to move in certain predictable ways, and then we go into more high percentage attacks. Nonetheless, there is a trick that you can employ which will make the Udigatami itself a much stronger attack, and you can finish people just straight out with the Udigatami. And this is to combine the movement of Udigatami with a forward shift. The reason why this is important is because, as we've been at pains to describe in this video, the whole key to Udigatami is head position. You want your head to be higher than their head. Now, what we've seen in most of the Udigatamis we've looked at so far is that we want our opponent's head to come down as low as possible. But you'll see that when we worked, our own head was also pretty low. And as a result, yes, I did a good job of bringing his head down,
but my own head was pretty close to the floor because my shoulder's on the mat. And so when he struggles to bring the head back up, it's not that hard for him to get the higher head position. And the man with the higher head typically wins the battle for elbow position. And ultimately, Udigatami is a battle over the elbow. You lose the head position, you lose the elbow, it's all gone. Okay? And that's why we put a high priority on having follow-up attacks. Now, there is a way to make it more likely you'll get the higher head position and him the lower head position. And that's to work with a forward shift. Okay, first, what is a forward shift? In previous videos, some of you will remember, a forward shift is a body movement where I take my opponent, where I start in a supine position, I take my opponent's body weight a little bit forward with my knees, like so, and then I spring him forward as I sit up, just like so. So it takes me from a seated situation, which kind of limits my ability to move, to a situation where I'm seated and I'm ready to attack. Okay. Now, what if I started a forward shift with an underhook? Okay. You can see I have an underhook here. He's here in front of me, and I hit my forward shift, and I sit up. What does that do? It puts my head way over his head. Now, it's true I'm not in a very stable position because I'm sitting, but it's stable enough to start an Udigatami attack. Okay, so this time as we work, I'm going to take the high elbow position, elbow pointing up, just like so. The more my elbow points down, the more he can rotate inside my elbow and escape. So I start by taking the high elbow and locking and turning a little bit onto my side. And from that side position, I hit the forward shift so that I'm way over my training partner. You're almost there with the lock now. Nick Ortiz will tell you that it already feels like it's not done, but it's getting scary at this point. And then from here, when I fall back down to the floor, you go right into your finish. Okay? So this is a very, very practical way to finish with the Udigatami itself. We start off with an underhook. Then I take high elbow position, like so. Low elbow means his head can rise and he can rotate out, like so. Okay? So when we start off, I start with the high elbow position up to the ceiling. So he goes to rotate his elbow, it won't be easy. I reinforce it. I come ever so slightly onto my side, and then I hit my forward shift, not straight down the mat, but 45 degrees. So that we end up right over our man. And as a result, we're in the perfect position now to go in on the attack. It just gives you that head height advantage at the onset of the move. Okay? If I do all of the move with my shoulders on the mat, down here, shoulders on the mat the whole time, as I'm trying to make my adjustments, his head's rising, and it's all gone. It's a lost battle. Okay? So instead, as we play down here on the mat, I come up and I get that high head position. So that right from the start of the action, you have all those mechanical advantages. Okay, when he goes to yank out now, it's so difficult, and you get strong finishes as a result. Okay, so what does this do? What does this forward shift add to the equation? It adds the idea that when you first initiate the attack, you have a decisive advantage in head height. You have perfect high elbow position. And as a result, you get off to such a strong start to the move that when you do commit to the floor to break him, you've got too many advantages in your pocket, and it's much harder for him to escape. Okay? So, conventionally, we just start down here where I have no advantage in head height. Our heads are the same height. And so it's an even fight. And as I try to get my adjustments and he goes to make his adjustments, it's like, it can go either way. Okay? As opposed to a situation where I get the high elbow and I come up and my head is decisively higher than his. So that by the time I commit down to the floor, everything's set in place. When he goes to yank out and twist out now, it's a hell of a lot harder. Okay, because you have the decisive elbow position, your knees are set, and you got off to such a strong start that your opponent could not recover in the time available. As opposed to a conventional method of operating
where your head position had no intrinsic advantage over your opponent's head position. So neither one of you had an intrinsically strong start over the other. So if your opponent knows what Udigatami is, knows how to defend it, it's got a pretty good chance of getting out. You'll have to go on to your follow-up moves. So this is just a way of getting such a strong start with so much advantage that it's impossible for your opponent to catch up in the time available before the lock comes on. I'll just demonstrate it from a few other angles so you kind of get an idea of what's going on with this forward shift. So, from any guard situation, I control the head. I have my underhook that is the prerequisite of most Udigatami attacks. And from here, I point my elbow high. The lower my elbow, the easier the rotation for him to escape. So I want a nice high elbow position. Now, I hit a forward shift that puts my head up far higher than his. Now from here, I lock up my hands, and as I commit to the mat, my knees are already locked in place. He goes to yank out now, and you guys know what the formula is. My head moves towards him, hips move away, and we get very strong breaks. Okay? Let's demonstrate it all the way from half guard. Here we are, half guard situation. Elbow escape. Knee goes in. Second foot goes in. Capture. Off the capture, we set up. You've got the decisive advantage in head height. You're face towards your opponent's head. He goes to raise his head. You're too far over it. Lock your hands. He goes to pull his arm free. Goes to raise the head. Difficult. And as a result, by the time we commit to the mat, you've got that very strong breaking position. As opposed to more conventional methods, when my head's down here, I try to move out, he's moving his head up, and it's just going to be tough. You might be much better served just going into follow-up attacks as a result. Okay? So my favorite way of applying the Udigatami, begin with a forward shift. Get an unfair advantage in head height. And then you'll start with so much advantage over an opponent, it's going to be hard for them to catch up. Imagine you were going against, in a foot race, a sprinting race, against someone who was much faster than yourself. But you cheated by walking 50 meters ahead of them, so that when the race started, they had to sprint 100 meters and you only had to complete 50 meters. Simply by cheating in this fashion and putting the start line much closer to the finish line for you, you would probably win the race, even against someone who was much faster than yourself. That's exactly what you're doing here. You're using the forward shift to cheat yourself into a superior head position where even if your opponent is stronger, faster, and knows what you're doing, you've started with so much advantage at that point, it's going to be hard for them in the time available to get back in front. Let's change our focus towards a very, very useful and controlling method of working from half guard bottom that works particularly well without the gi. This is to make use of a simple grip of our opponent's lower body, the scorpion. In America now, this is mostly known as a lockdown. Eddie Bravo made this a big part of his half guard game. And let's have a look at what it is, what it's good for, what it's not good for. Okay, a scorpion, that was the name that was prevalent when I started using this many, many years ago. On the East Coast, it was always known as a scorpion, but in most of America now and around the world, it's usually called a lockdown. So, first, what is a scorpion? It's a control of my opponent's lower leg, the leg that is trapped between mine. It controls below the knee, down by the ankle, and it's designed for one thing, to stop an opponent's leg from moving forward. So, if an opponent is here, and I have a hold of my training partner's leg, one of the big dangers is that his knee will cut across my thigh, going forward and pass. So that's a constant danger. So in the sport of judo, many people used to lock this grip here to prevent the knee from coming forward. Now in the sport of judo, if you don't initiate guard passes from half guard within a very short time frame, the referee will stand you up. So a very common thing in the 1980s and 90s in the sport of judo was for people who weren't good on the ground to just lock a scorpion and just hold on. Then they would look at the referee would be like,
okay, time's up, and stand them back up to the feet. So it was used mostly as a stalling tactic. Okay, and it was very prevalent in the sport of judo in those days. So if someone goes to pass my guard, you just hold on for a short period of time, strengthen out the leg and hold on. It's kind of tough. If the guy doesn't know what he's doing on top, it's tough just to free your foot. There are some simple ways to get out of this position, but if you don't know what they are, you can definitely get held here for, 5, 10, 15 seconds, however long it took in international judo, and then the referee would stand you up. So that was the primary use of it in grappling for many years, just as a kind of a stalling tactic from half guard bottom. My own interest in it started because many of my students got very good at leg locks, and it was a great way to shut down dangerous leg lockers when you're working from half guard. Half guard can be a dangerous thing for the guy on bottom when you go in with a good leg locker, because they can take their knee across the thigh, the other knee across the thigh, and from here they can start backstepping into your legs. And from here cause all kinds of problems. Another way they can work is to go spinning around the leg and go into your legs like so. Okay? Scorpions are an excellent way to stop both of these from happening. If I hold on to a tight scorpion, he tries to spin around the leg, it's never going to happen. He goes into his back step, it's never going to happen. Okay? So it was a good way to stop a dangerous leg locker from going into the more common forms of leg lock entry out of half guard. So it has its, when I was introduced to it, it was seen mostly as a defensive measure. It was a good way to stop someone for a short time frame, at least, if they didn't know how to get out of there, from advancing into guard passes. And it was a good way to shut someone down, at least in the initial parts of the engagement, where they would just spin into your leg lock, into leg locks out of half guard top. But these are defensive measures and not what is particularly interesting about scorpions. When everything changed when I started to look at the idea of the use of scorpions in conjunction with a scoop grip. Now, interestingly, Eddie Bravo has told me he's also a big user of this method, and there's one of the few commonalities between what we do is based around the use of scoop grips along with a scorpion, or a lockdown as he would call it. The idea here is that if I'm underneath my opponent's arm, like so, okay, scorpions are generally not particularly useful if my opponent is underneath my arm and pinning my shoulders to the mat. There's some very simple and effective ways for him to disentangle the scorpion and go on and pass. So we want to be underneath our opponent's arm like so. If I have a scorpion under these circumstances and I have a scoop grip on my training partner's leg, then we can start working some magic from this position. And you can take the humble scorpion from being a defensive measure into an extremely effective offensive measure. Because when I have a scorpion on one of his legs and a scoop grip on the other, that gives me complete control of the space between my opponent's knees. And that space is one of the most important for both the guard, the user of the guard, and the passer of the guard. So what we're going to look to do under these circumstances is get to this scoop grip. But the problem is he can get a healthy crossface on me here, and if he gets a strong crossface and sprawls his leg back, I can lose control of my opponent's leg. Okay, so typically the smart thing to do is to begin, as always, I'm sure you guessed it, with Kizushi, elevation. So what I'm going to do, instead of just going straight to my opponent's leg, we're going to go in, we're going to get straight to our training partner's armpits. We're going to keep our elbows close to our side so that he can't get into underhooks on either side. If my elbows are flared, then he can get into underhooks, and now my scorpion's not much good to me. So we always want elbows in close. And from here, I'm going to take him up and forward and create an off balance that forces him up like so. Okay? Now, do you think someone's going to accept this position with my head high as in their back? Of course they're not. Okay? They're going to posture up. And they're going to look to get an overhook, which prevents me from getting behind them. If my opponent's an idiot and just stays in this position, well, there's no reason why I can't just heist up and take their back. Okay? So once again, we start off in front of our training partner. We get a grip on the ribs or armpit, and we use our scorpion to lift and then extend forward and over to the side. From this position, as he goes high with the whizzer, we go low with the scoop. Okay, so as he's going high, we're going low. And then from this situation, I'm faced over to the east. I'm going to rotate my whole body over to the west and force him to base out. Just like so. Now, do you remember? I'll rotate this way. Do you remember what we said, fellas, about controlling the space between his knees? I want you guys to get one of your buddies in this position and give him a simple challenge. Get up on your hands. Try to bring your knees together. You'll never do it. I don't care how strong your opponent, your training partner is. If you get a guy in this position, propped up on his hands, with a scoop grip, elbow deep, and a full scorpion on, that area between the knees belongs to you now. It's yours. You, in addition, have a free hand. Your opponent's best bet is to walk towards you and flatten you out and return you where you came from. That's the safe thing for him to do. And now he can start bringing his knees together, cross-facing and sprawling, cross-facing and sprawling, and then dig himself out of that situation, okay? But it's extremely difficult for him to do that if you know what you're doing on bottom, okay? So once again, we're gonna start off. Starting position, I can't let him have the underhook. That's no good, okay? So what do you think we'd do to get that underhook in place? I'm sure you all guessed it. We're gonna go into a knee lever. We take our foot across our training partner's knee. We hit a simple knee lever that forces him to base out with his arm and gives us what we really wanted all along, the underhook. Now we take our two elbows in, we throw the outside leg over, we put in that scorpion. Now we hit a scorpion elevator, and we come up. As he goes to recover high with the whizzer, we go in low with the scoop grip. Now we rotate from east across the west, and you're in the perfect position to work. My head is the same height as his. The only advantage he has is his hips are higher than my hips. But I'm in a perfect position to heist, and I have control of my opponent's top leg. So if I release my scorpion now, and we got into a scramble together, you would have an enormous advantage in virtue of the fact that you control your opponent's top leg. As we come up, we're in the perfect position now to put in the front tight waist. Here, he kicks his leg out, and you've got a full tight waist locked up on your training partner. As he tries to bring his hands off the floor, it's awfully difficult. You've got a lot of weight on him. Now I just find the shoelace, break him down to the mat. You can either go to the wrist, you can go to the seatbelt, whichever one you prefer. Okay, so let's have a look at all that again. Guys, I can't emphasize enough this critical idea of controlling the space between your opponent's knees. Regardless of whether you're passing someone's guard or working from your own guard, this is always a powerful, powerful tool in grappling. So, once again, first just reaffirming what is a scorpion. Okay, here I just have two legs around one of his legs. My outside leg comes over. I lock a triangle. And from here I put my shoelaces in front of his shoelaces. It's not really a true figure four. It's more almost like crossed feet down here by the heel. He tries to bring his foot forward. He'll never do it. Okay? The scorpion is designed to immobilize his foot from moving forwards. Interestingly, a scorpion does nothing to prevent a hamstring curl. Doesn't resist that at all. Okay? That's a key insight for how to get out of a scorpion. I'll deal with that another time. Okay? Now, from here, he goes to bring his foot forward. Can't do it. It's locked in place. However, my scorpion is not very useful when he has the underhook and the crossface. It's pretty easy for him to get out of here. So it's important for us that we be able to get rid of his underhook on the outside shoulder. Our favorite way of doing this is with a simple knee lever. It forces him to base out. If he doesn't base out, then he's an idiot, and he'll fall right over. So we force him to base out. We go through underneath his armpits. We throw the scorpion into place. We come up, he goes high, and we go low. From this position, I rotate everything 180 degrees. I was facing out like so, and then we come up with our head the same height as his. You're in a situation now where the scramble gets really interesting. My head has the slight advantage in height, but his hips have the advantage in height. So from here, we come out. I often play a trick where I stand on one of my training partner's ankles, and then from here, I start the action of heisting. As we go to get up together, we're walking up forwards, getting close, and I step and get to my front tight waist like so. Even as I lose the leg, you gain the body lock. Now from here, you put weight forward on your training partner's hands, then you physically find the shoelace and break them down to a situation where you control your training partner's hips. Okay? So this is our first move out of the scoop scorpion. Very, very useful.
Let's look at another very effective way of using the scoop scorpion. This is probably the single most productive use of a scorpion or a lockdown. Instead of using it just as a defensive measure, we're using it as an active attacking measure from half guard. We understand that we need some form of underhook. Our favorite way of getting to that is going to be some form of knee lever, where he starts in what most people would call a dominant position. We go through, we force our opponent to base out, and now we're in a good position to get our hands in close. We throw the legs over, we go through and come up. As he goes to recover, we go underneath and we get to the scoop scorpion position. Okay, it's a very practical and effective way of getting there. Now, our whole thing with a scoop scorpion is to start facing out to the east and then go all the way out to the west. So we make a complete change of direction, forcing him to base out like so. Okay. Now in the previous move, we came up to a hand. That's good for scrambling. For the move we're about to look at, we're going to stay down on the shoulder. Why? What's the difference? Because I want to pass my opponent's leg from behind me to in front of me. That will expose his back. And it's almost impossible for me to do that if I'm propped up on my hand or elbow. I need to be on my shoulder. One shoulder to be precise. I don't want to be on two shoulders where he can just sprawl his leg back, bring his head back over me, and recover the position. So it's important under these circumstances that I come out here to my side. I want to bring his leg all the way up to my collarbone. Don't hit the leg here on the bicep. Take your arm, straighten, and bring the foot to the collarbone. Now come in and get a thumb post right here, your training partner's heel, and double up on it. Push the arm across to the side and cover the whole leg with your chest. Guys, you must cover the hamstring with your chest. Don't cover the heel. Okay? Come up and get to the hamstring. Now, your biggest fear here is your opponent will reach back with the left arm and put on a whizzer. Okay, that will protect the back. So it's important from here that we put our ear on his back. When he goes to reach back for the whizzer, it's very, very difficult. From here, I'm going to stand on my training partner's foot and heel. When he reaches back for that whizzer, it's tough. When he tries to scramble up and away, it just helps us get through into our favorite attacking position. We find the shoelace and break him down to the mat. Okay? So, this simple leg pass out of the scorpion enables us to pass his leg from behind us to in front and expose our training partner's back. So he's got a winning position. I can't accept that. I force him to base out with that knee lever. We go through, we take inside hand position, we go to our scorpion. We hit a scorpion elevator and come up, we go underneath. I start facing one way and rotate out the other. I bring his shin up to my collarbone. I get a double thumb post, which enables us to pass the leg, go over the top, and bring our chest all the way up to the hamstring. If I keep my head in front of him, he can lock a whizzer. It's not the end of the world. Don't worry, I'll come back to that next move, I promise. But it's better if I can connect my ear over like so. Now I take my foot, I stand on his Achilles tendon. So if he tries to slide the foot out, it's quite difficult.
As a result, we can heist up into good position. Now, as he tries to get up to his feet, you've always got weight over the top of him. You can go in and stand on the shoelaces. You can just walk around and spiral onto the floor. I leave that up to you. You can go to the wrist and cover the hips. You can go to your seatbelt and knee slide through and under. I leave that up to you. They're both great choices. So there's a scorpion leg pass, which gives you direct access to your opponent's back. Let's go further into our study of the scoop scorpion position. One of the best positions from half guard to take a largely defensive instrument, a scorpion or lockdown, and really make it into an offensive instrument. One of the great features of the scoop scorpion is that it's one of the most robust grips without a gi. I don't care how slippery or sweaty your opponent is. If you get this grip, it's really tough for your opponent to break away from you. So it has tremendous value in no gi competition. Now, let's go further into this. Okay, we've seen when someone's on top of us, half guard, the one thing we can't accept, if we're going to be effective with scorpions, you can't let them get chest-to-chest contact with underhooks, cross faces, etc. So your first thing, you've got to be able to get your shoulders, in this case my outside shoulder, off the mat. So we're going to start with a simple knee lever that tilts my opponent over and gives us what we really wanted. Hands inside like so. Now we throw the outside leg over, lock that little mini triangle, and go to your scorpion. Now we hit the scorpion elevator. It forces our opponent into a dilemma. If he stays with his hands on the mat, back exposure. He's an idiot. No one's that naive. What they all do is they reach back for the whizzer. We go underneath and get that scoop grip. So now you got a scoop scorpion. Once you get a scoop scorpion, it's an easy thing to use the stretch of the scorpion and the scoop grip to dominate the space between his knees. From here, we're going to hit a leg pass, where we pass the leg through and put it in front of us. As a result, we can come up and get our chest to the hamstring. Now this time, guys, we screw up a little bit and we put our head in a position where he can reach back and touch a whizzer in place. Now, you guys know that a huge part of your success from half guard bottom is the degree to which you know and understand the workings of a whizzer. And one of the most important is the idea with the distinction between a front whizzer, where his opponent's hand is in front of me, versus a back whizzer, where his hand is behind my shoulder. A front whizzer is extremely robust and does a fine job of defending the back, but it comes at a price. Anytime someone's whizzer is in front of me, it's vulnerable. It's a difficult thing for them to stop me from taking them backwards. Okay, because their connection to me is so tight that if I can get this shoulder beyond their hip, they're in trouble. Regardless of whether you have a body lock or a single leg, same thing. The tighter his connection, single leg, the tighter the connection of his whizzer, the more I'm looking to get this shoulder outside this hip. And that's what puts them down. Okay? So the tightness does a great job of defending the back, but makes them vulnerable to be taken backwards to their back. Now, how do they stop this from happening? By loosening the whizzer, by taking it from in front to behind. And now they can hop with me much, much better. But this comes at a price. The lack of connection means I can get to their back. And that simple dilemma between front and back whizzer is one of the great keys to understanding half guard attacks. It applies just the same in the scorpion situation. So we'll start from here. We've got a scoop scorpion in place. I make the rotation out to the side. From here, I hit the leg pass and I come up, but I screw up. I put my head in the wrong position and my opponent gets a whizzer. Question for you. Is this a front or a back whizzer? You can't see it from the camera here because of my poorly chosen angle. I'll show it for you another angle soon. But Nick Ortiz is going to answer the question for you. Is this a front or a back?
It's a back wizard.
If you try to maneuver to the front, can you do it?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because your body's...
There's too much connection of my lat to your back. Okay? So you do have a whizzer, but you don't have a front whizzer. So that when I get up to my knees, and he gets up to his base, when I lock my hands, look, it's a back whizzer. Make a strong base. No matter how strong his base here, once I come up and I walk to the other side, I will always beat his whizzer. Let's understand something, guys. Take a kneeling position with the whizzer facing the camera. If your opponent has a front whizzer, I'll never walk around it. But if he has a back whizzer, because I've gotten so far around behind, I will always walk around it successfully. Get as strong as you can. Strong base, knees apart, everything strong.
Understood.
From here, you'll always beat it. Here's a great rule of thumb for you. You can always walk around a back whizzer. If you try to walk around in front of a front whizzer and the guy knows what he's doing, you can throw you flat on your back. Okay? But a back whizzer, you can almost always walk safely around. So your first observation, whenever you get into a whizzer situation from half guard, ask yourself, is it a front whizzer or a back whizzer? If the answer is it is a back whizzer, walk around it. Take the guy's back. Don't be afraid. Let's have a look at this from another angle. Okay, we're in half guard. We go into a knee lever that gives us hand position. We get our legs into a scorpion. We come up, he goes high. We go low. We rotate out to the side. From here, we hit a simple leg pass. We come up, he goes for the whizzer. Do you see how the hand is in behind? Nick, try to dig your hand to a front whizzer. It's very, very difficult. And it's pretty easy for us as a result to come up. He tries to hold that whizzer, strong, strong, strong. And I just walk around it. As a result, we're around the other side and in the perfect position to go on the attack. Okay? Learning to read an opponent's whizzer, and specifically to read is it a front whizzer or a back whizzer, is a huge part of your success. What I recommend to you when you're using your scoop scorpion and you come up after a leg pass, if you can get your head, your ear to his back, that's the best. But if you screw up and the guy gets the whizzer, be confident that in the overwhelming majority of cases, it's going to be a back whizzer. Just lock your body lock and walk around it. You're going to get your opponent's back, go right into a superb attacking position. Now, let's go further into our use of the scorpion and start using a heisting movement to come up from bottom and put our opponent down. So we have an opponent here in our half guard. If we have our scoop scorpion in place, we know what our basic modus operandi here is. We want to start facing in a given direction. So if I'm on my right shoulder, I want to turn and come across onto my left shoulder. Now, from here, our opponent wants to come back into us, okay? So there may well be a period of time here where I have to frame on my opponent, okay? You can even frame with both hands because it's not really to my opponent's advantage to bring his knee across because that will expose his own back to me. So it's not really a smart thing for him to do. So you actually have the option of framing with either hand, and sometimes it'll be both, okay? But at some point, we want to start the action of coming up on our training partner, just like so. Now from here, I'm going to come up to my knees and put my knees behind me, just like so. Now, try as he might to stay up on his hands. You can do whatever you want, walk your hands away presumably. It's going to be very easy for me to take his knee across his body and just heist forward and drive him down into a strong passing position. If he tries to lock his guard from here, he can't because you're still dominating the space between his knees. And it's going to be really easy for you to put your knee on top of his. And then from there, come through into a strong passing position. So essentially all you do is heist up with your scorpion in place and you'll get that top position almost guaranteed. So using the mechanisms we've looked at earlier, we get to our starting position. I have a scoop grip and a tight waist. I have a scorpion on my training partner's shoelaces, just like so. I start on my right shoulder and then I make a complete rotation across onto my left shoulder. I put my hand behind me as a base of support. Sometimes there might have to be some framing here as he tries to come back in and face towards us. But what we're looking to do is to hit a heist where I go from a seated position up to my knees. Once I get onto my knees, I just walk his knee across and we end up in perfect attacking position down on the floor. The space between his knees is well controlled. We get our foot above our training partner's knee, tries to close his guard. It's impossible. And from there, we get a nice pass. So essentially, we have a scorpion, we come up, and from that seated position, we just hit a hip heist. Like any other hip heist, we just bring our knees up. The only complication is that you'll be doing it with your feet in a loose triangle position or crossed ankle position. That's the only difference. Other than that, it's like any other hip heist. You'll be heisting to your knee, not your feet. Okay, so it's a pretty easy heist to hit, even under combat conditions. So we start off in here with a scorpion. I go across to the other side, my hand is behind me, I turn side on. I don't want to be square onto him. If he pushes back into me, I have no base behind me, I get rolled back to my back. So we want to turn our body side on. So my body is side on like so. Then I just take my bottom knee and just heist it in front like so. You still have a scorpion on his ankle. I take his knee across his body, forces him to an elbow, and then ultimately down to his back. Now, we just put our shoelaces on top of his knee, he goes to lock up guard. There's just nothing to lock. As a result, you get a superb hip heist up into top position.